attended Toronto Kirtan where there were Khalistani flags. Unfortunately, there was no comment that came to the fore from Trudeau or anybody from his government. That same year, Trudeau again addressed a Khalsa Day parade which had Bindranwale floats. Again, all we heard was silence after that. In 2018, a convicted Khalistani terrorist, Jaspal Atwal, was invited to Trudeau's reception here in India. 2 years later, cut to 2020, what happens? Justin Trudeau comes out and backs farmers' protests here in India that were protesting against the three-farm legislations. Protests that we do know were at some point hijacked by certain vested interests. Justin Trudeau came out and voiced his opinion about a protest, about a legislation that is only the business of India, a democratic country. That is why we're asking questions of the Canadian government and of Justin Trudeau. Canada is also being accused of double standards. Let me tell you why. Because on one hand, the Canadian government claims that Canada does not support or recognize a so-called Khalistani referendum. But what's the reality? We know that at least 2 referendums have been held in just the last 2 months. The first stage was in September, where the pro-Khalistani organizations felt that wasn't enough. There were more people that wanted to come out and vote, which is why another one was held just yesterday. Now, on the face of it, the Canadian government claims that it respects sovereignty, unity and territorial integrity of India, a friendly nation. What's the chilling reality, unfortunately, is that anti-India posters, anti-Hindu posters are seen plastered and spotted across multiple cities, especially in Brampton, where we also had the mayor face the wrath of the people. And that's really the big problem here, which is why we're asking the question plainly. Why is there an anti-India tirade in Canada, and is the government there turning a blind eye to that?
Our position on the efforts by anti-Indian elements to hold a so-called Khalistan referendum is well known. It has been conveyed to the Canadian government both in New Delhi and in Canada.
Why are we seeing a rise in these instances? Why is there a campaign against India? Is there one? And what is the government doing to tackle it there in Canada? Those are the questions we'll find answers to here on this broadcast. Former diplomat Ashok Sajjanhar now joins me on this broadcast. Dr. Monica Verma, who's a strategic affairs expert, will also be joining us shortly. Kuldeep Singh Shekhawat, who's the director of MATV, will be joining us as well. But I want to ask my first question to Jaswant Singh Thekedar, who's the Prabandhak of Gurudwara Miripiri in London. And this issue of pro-Khalistani sympathizers, pro-Khalistani members hitting out on the streets is not just limited to Canada. We are seeing that in the UK as well. But with Canada, there seems to be a free run that seems to be given there, isn't it? Ashok Sajjanhar, I'd like to get you started on this debate with the diplomatic angle of it. India has registered a strong protest multiple times. Just a few days ago, India said that we have spoken to Canada. They have assured us that there is absolutely no support coming in and they do not recognize these Khalistani referendums that are being held on Canadian soil. Then what is stopping them from putting an end to it? Mr. Sajjanhar? I believe we do not have that line with Ashok Sajjanhar. We'll try and reconnect with him and all of our other guests as well. But Jaswant Singh Thekedar is also with me on this broadcast. And like we were discussing, it is about Canada, it is about UK, it is about the larger malice, and that really is the problem. But why are we seeing a rise in these kind of acts, in these kind of Khalistani sympathizers trying to whip up sentiment in multiple parts of the country, of late, especially in Canada? Jaswant Singh?
Hello.
Yes, sir, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Hello.
Mr. Tekadar, can you hear me?
Hello.
I believe we do not have that link with Mr. Tekadar either. We'll try and reconnect with all our guests as we get you this big story coming in from Canada, where there are multiple instances coming to the fore of anti-India sentiment being whipped up. The most recent one is that of a Khalistani referendum, a second one at that in just 2 months. We're seeing clashes that erupted, we're seeing temples being defaced, we're seeing a campaign against Hindutva as well. But all we're seeing from the government of the day, which is the Trudeau government in Canada, is silence. And that's the most unfortunate bit, because on one hand, they say that they believe in India's sovereignty, unity and territorial integrity. But when there is an attempt to question those exact principles as far as India is concerned, there's absolute silence. Ashok Shahjahanhar, I believe, is back with us on this broadcast. And Mr. Shahjahanhar, like I was asking you, diplomatically, India and Canada have had friendly relations. We consider each other allies. But when something like this happens, when Canada says, yes, we do accept that you're a sovereign nation, we'll do everything to protect it, but on the other hand, do nothing when it happens on your own soil.
No, absolutely. You're very right. I'm sorry I wasn't audible earlier. Yes, you're very right. Because I think in terms of saying Canada says all the right things, but then it doesn't walk the talk. And we have seen it multiple times, and not only this time, particularly, I think since the time that Mr. Justin Trudeau has won the elections and he has been the Prime Minister, we are quite aware of, when he visited India himself. And basically, his focus, his eye was not so much on strengthening relations with India, bilateral ties with India, but how to milk the whole, his actions in terms of reaching out to the potential voters in his own country. So here also, what I see is that basically it is vote bank politics. He doesn't want to fall on the wrong side of the electorate. He considers it to be a significant electorate, his supporters, and that is why he will say the right things. The Canadian establishment will say the right things, but they will not lift a little finger to stamp this out. As you said very correctly, on the 18th of September, we had a referendum. More than 100,000 Sikhs in Canada participated in this referendum. Yesterday also, more than 75,000 Sikhs have participated. And there are all these hate crimes, there are all these criminal activities that have been going on in the country, and the Canadian government is doing nothing at all. And even when we had in India the against the farm laws, the stir by the Kisan, the protests, the demonstrations, Canada had no role to play in that. But looking at its own vote bank, it was making statements like there should be freedom to protest, freedom to demonstrate, peaceful demonstrations should not be snubbed out. And I think we have seen what
and there
Canada
too we saw the kind of duplicity that came to the fore. Exactly, when the truckers' protest was happening there, and the kind of reaction that came to the fore when that was happening was completely contradictory to the lessons that were being preached to India, when there was something internal that was being discussed on the streets of India. But Canada decided to have a view back then. Why do they not then have a view about the kind of anti-India activities that go on right under their nose? That's the question many in India are asking. And I request you to stay on with me because Jaswant Singh Tekadar is also now with me on this broadcast. Jaswant Singh जी, मुझे आपसे ये पूछना है कि गुरपतवंत सिंह पन्नून पाकिस्तान का जो रिश्ता है, जो आजाद खालिस्तान का सपना दिखा रहे हैं गुरपतवंत सिंह पन्नू कनाडा में बैठ के,
हाँ जी,
ये सपना कभी पूरा नहीं हो सकता।
हाँ जी, क्या पूछना? हाँ जी,
गुरपतवंत सिंह पन्नून पाकिस्तान के साथ मिलकर जो ये आजाद खालिस्तान का सपना दिखाने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं लोगों को, ये जो रेफरेंडम्स लिए जा रहे हैं, ये सपना कभी पूरा नहीं हो सकता।
ये तो एक पैसों की खेड है जी, ये कोई खालिस्तान की गल थोड़ी है
जी।
ये तो लोगों को मूर्ख बनाने वास्ते, पैसे इकट्ठे करने वास्ते वो अपनी दुकानदारी चला रहा है। इतना खालिस्तान का कोई संबंध नहीं गा
जी।
और जी गवांढी देश की एक्टिविटीज आ पिछले 40 साल तो वो सानू खराब कर रहा वा और सिखां दे सिर दे उत्ते ਉਹ ਵਿਰੋਧੀ ਪ੍ਰਚਾਰ ਕਰਕੇ ਤੇ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਮਰਵਾ ਰਿਹਾ ਤੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਏਜੰਟ ਪੈਦਾ ਕੀਤੇ ਹੋਏ ਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਰਾਹੀਂ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਦੁਬਦਾ ਪਾ ਰਿਹਾ
ਜੀ।
ਔਰ ਇਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਨਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਬਣ ਸਕਦਾ, ਨਾ ਇਹ ਰੈਫਰੈਂਡਮ ਕਦੀ ਕਬੂਲ ਹੋ ਸਕਦਾ ਤੇ ਨਾ ਇਹ ਰੈਫਰੈਂਡਮ ਹੈਗਾ। ਇਹ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰਿਆਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੈਨੇਡੀਅਨ, ਅਮਰੀਕਨ, ਯੂਕੇ ਦੇ ਪਾਸਪੋਰਟ ਹੋਲਡਰ ਵੋਟਾਂ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਪਾ ਸਕਦੇ ਨੇ
ਜੀ।
ਜੇ ਰੈਫਰੈਂਡਮ ਹੋਊਗਾ ਤਾਂ ਪੰਜਾਬ 'ਚ ਹੋਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ, ਜਿਹੜੇ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਲੋਕ ਜਾਂ ਇੰਡੀਅਨ ਲੋਕ ਉੱਥੇ ਵੋਟ ਪਾਉਣ। ਇਹ ਦੂਜੇ ਦੇਸ਼ਾਂ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਿਟੀਜ਼ਨ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਵੋਟ ਪਾ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ, ਉਹ ਵੀ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰਿਆਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਬੈਠ ਕੇ। ਇਹ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇੱਕ ਬੜਾ ਵੱਡਾ ਧੋਖਾ ਦੇ ਰਿਹਾ, ਉਹ ਸਿਰਫ ਇਹਦੇ ਪਿੱਛੇ ਉਹਦੀ ਆਪਣੀ ਕਮਾਈ ਦਾ ਸਾਧਨ ਹੈ। ਤੁਸੀਂ ਦੇਖੋ ਰਸ਼ੀਆ ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਸਟੇਟਾਂ ਤੇ ਅਜੇ ਕਬਜ਼ਾ ਕੀਤਾ ਯੂਕਰੇਨ ਦੀਆਂ ਨੇ, ਉਹਨੇ ਰੈਫਰੈਂਡਮ ਕਰਾਇਆ, ਉਸ ਦੇਸ਼ ਨੇ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਅੱਜ ਤੱਕ UN ਨੂੰ ਐਕਸੈਪਟ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਦੀ
ਜੀ।
ਤੇ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ कर लेगी?
जी बिल्कुल, और आप रशिया यूक्रेन की बात कर रहे हैं, एंड आई वुड लाइक टू गेट कुलदीप सिंह शेखावत as well, because these kind of referendums and the idea to whip up sentiment by organizations like Seek for Justice is not new. It's not new to Canada either, and it's happened in multiple parts of the world as well. But what's interesting is when there was this referendum that Russia was conducting in Ukraine, Justin Trudeau came out and said that that's not acceptable. You cannot do so. Why then is he silent on these kind of referendums that are being held on his soil against a friendly nation, against a country where they say that we will completely accept your sovereign right, your territorial integrity, but turn a blind eye to what's happening on our soil because it doesn't suit our narrative?
Hello.
Mr. Shekhawat, can you hear me?
Suits them, they will agree to that. What doesn't suit them, they won't agree to that. That doesn't help Canada, so they will agree to what they feel is right. Referendums, and that too in Canada, how does it impact India? It doesn't impact India in any way. So who's going to accept it? Nobody. It's not going to go to any organized
We'll try and reconnect that line with Mr. Shekhawat there. I believe he's traveling, which is why we're losing that link with him. But Dr. Monica Verma, as far as the relationships between Canada and India is concerned, India has made it very, very clear. We've registered strong protests on multiple occasions as far as these kind of attacks are happening on temples, the kind of narrative that is being peddled there, where they're having these how Hindutva is fascist and how the RSS is leading to violence. They're having these kind of campaigns. We have posters of anti-Hindu, anti-India narrative that keep cropping up in parts of Canada, and yet there is absolutely no action. As far as diplomatically stepping up is concerned, where does that leave India now? Because something surely needs to be done by the Indian government.
Actually, if we look at it closely, India is not only issuing warnings, but it has also taken certain credible steps when it comes to registering its protests. So a referendum took place on 18th of September, I believe, the last one, not this one, but the previous one. And at that time, India had issued a travel advisory saying that, if you are going to Canada, then it's not a safe place to go because of the entire Khalistani extremism. So I think that travel advisory, we all know how popular Canada is in India, and so many, business travelers and then students and other, people for different reasons, they are always traveling to Canada. And in fact, Canada is also looking at certain sort of trade or economic gain with India. When Justin was visiting India, he was trying to meet our Prime Minister and, all the important people so that India-Canada relations could become more important. They could, grow into something more meaningful. But due to Canada not simply respecting India's sovereignty, India's territorial integrity, I think it's going to be a huge issue. And when it comes to the entire strategy of Indo-Pacific, if we look at India, India has become a very important player in this part of the world. And if Canada cannot do that, then I think it's going to jeopardize Canada's national interest going further.
Right. So, Ashok Sajanhar, it is really in Canada's interest to, turn this around, to take a greater stand as far as these kind of instances are concerned. Also because the kind of relationship that both the countries share, yes, also the personal rapport that the Prime Minister shares with several of the world leaders, including Justin Trudeau. That is something that they will have to now start to act on. That's one aspect of it. Another aspect is this man who sits on Canadian soil, Gurpatwant Singh Pannoon, but it's not just Canada who is not acting against him, because we've tried to get an Interpol red corner notice against him as well, not once but at least on 3 different occasions, and that too hasn't fructified. How then do we move forward?
No, you're very right. First point, I think what Mr. Trudeau is doing is, shooting himself in the foot, because he knows even these people, the Khalistanis, as your earlier two panelists said, that all these referenda, etc., they are not going to lead anywhere. And Mr. Trudeau should also realize it, that, it's not really going to take this whole referendum issue anywhere. So, and the only outcome of this is that Canada is spoiling its relations with India. Today, India is the fifth largest economy. In another 6-7 years, it's going to be the third largest economy. And Canada would definitely, all the countries would definitely need not only India's market, but also in terms of technological cooperation. India is the fastest growing major economy in the world. So I think, and there are a large number of Indians, the Indian diaspora in Canada is also very significant, leaving aside these Sikh Khalistani supporting elements there. So I think it is doing itself a disservice by by giving encouragement to these elements and not reaching out to India and strengthening relations, multifaceted relations across the board with India. As far as getting Pannu and the others, those against whom we have asked for Interpol, you would recall that very recently there was this international meeting of the Interpol countries and officials that was held in India. And I think the verdict that came out of there, maybe, there is, because issuing an Interpol notice is a technical sort of an issue. It's not really all that political an issue. So we need to provide all the information, provide all the details, because this is what the head of the Interpol at that time had said, right, that, some of the other individuals also against whom we wanted Interpol red corner notice to be issued, that there were some technical details that were missing. So I think India needs to, I'm certain that these are very legally accurate and exact documents that have to be furnished. So maybe India needs to do that, and we should be able to get there. But also we should continue to apply pressure on the governments that these elements are not given a free run, whether it is in Canada or it is in the United States or it is in the United Kingdom. We have seen that in the United Kingdom there has been a report that has been come from a think tank which has completely rubbished that there were any sort of Hindu terrorist elements or RSS sponsored elements that were involved in this rioting, etc., in Birmingham or Leicester. So I think we need to work with the governments also and take it forward accordingly. But also on the national level, on the international stage, also focus on the fact that these are terrorist elements and all countries need to work together to take action against these. Poonam.
Absolutely. He's wanted for terrorist acts here in India. He's a wanted man, this Gurpatwant Singh Pannoon, and yet he roams around freely. He spews venom. He spews this propaganda, false narrative. और जसवंत सिंह जी, मैं आपसे फिर से यही पूछना चाहूंगी कि कनाडा में अभी हम देख रहे हैं, लेकिन ये यूके में भी हो रहा था. यूके में भी कई जगह पे ये रेफरेंडम किया जा रहा था. इसी साल बिल्कुल जनवरी में भी हमने देखा ये. ऐसी क्या वजह है कि बार बार ये रेफरेंडम के कॉल्स उठते हैं? ऐसे कौन लोग हैं जो अपने वेस्टेड इंटरेस्ट के लिए ये जो एंटी इंडिया नैरेटिव है इसको जगाए रखें?
दो तरह के लोग है जी. एक जिन्हों ने पोलीटिकल साइलम लैनी आ, वो अपने आप को शो करते भी असीं खालिस्तानी आ. नंबर दो, ਜਿਹੜੇ ਲੋਕ ਇੱਥੇ ਬੈਠੇ ਆ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਕਦੀ ਵੀ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਨਹੀਂ ਜਾਣਾ, ਉਹ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰਿਆਂ 'ਚ ਬੈਠੇ ਆ ਤੇ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰਿਆਂ 'ਚੋਂ ਚੁੱਕ ਕੇ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰਿਆਂ 'ਚ ਰੈਫਰੈਂਡਮ ਕਰਾਉਂਦੇ ਆ. ਉਹ ਵਿਹਲੇ ਲੋਕ ਆ, ਬਜ਼ੁਰਗ ਲੋਕ, ਉਹ ਤੁਰ ਪੈਂਦੇ ਆ, ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਕੀ ਜੀ, ਉੱਥੇ ਚਾਹ ਪਾਣੀ ਮੁਫਤ ਮਿਲ ਜਾਂਦਾ. ਇਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਨਾ ਤਾਂ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਗੌਰਮੈਂਟ ਨੂੰ ਕੋਈ ਨੁਕਸਾਨ ਆ, ਇੰਡੀਆ ਗੌਰਮੈਂਟ ਦਾ ਕੁਝ ਨਹੀਂ ਵਿਗੜਦਾ. ਇਹ ਸਿਰਫ ਇਹਦੀ ਆਪਣੀ ਦੁਕਾਨਦਾਰੀ ਪੈਸੇ ਕਰਕੇ ਆ, ਪੈਸੇ ਕਰਕੇ ਉਹ ਕਰ ਰਿਹਾ। ਦੂਜੀ ਗੱਲ ਹੈ, ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਖਿਲਾਫ ਕੋਈ ਇਹੋ ਜਿਹਾ ਅਸਲੀਅਤ ਦੱਸਣ ਵਾਲੇ ਲੋਕ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਸਮਝਾਉਣ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਮੂਰਖ ਬਣਾ ਕੇ ਪੈਸੇ ਕਮਾ ਰਿਹਾ ਗਵਾਂਢੀ ਦੇਸ਼ ਕੋਲੋਂ। ਜੇ ਇਹ ਕੁਝ ਲੋਕ ਜੇ ਇਹ ਪੈਸੇ ਦੇ ਜ਼ੋਰ ਨਾਲ, ਐਡਵਰਟਾਈਜ਼ ਦੇ ਜ਼ੋਰ ਨਾਲ ਇਹ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਾ ਸਕਦਾ ਤੇ ਇਹਦੇ ਲੋਕ ਉਲਟ ਵੀ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ। ਜੇ ਕੋਈ ਪੈਸਾ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਕੋਲ ਹੋਏ ਤਾਂ ਉਹ ਖਰਚਣ, ਐਡਵਰਟਾਈਜ਼ ਕਰਨ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਲੋਕ ਗਲਤ ਆ। ਯੂਕੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਿਰਫ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਤੋਂ ਸਿਵਾ ਕੋਈ ਵੀ ਆਦਮੀ ਇਦਾਂ ਦਾ ਨਹੀਂਗਾ। ਜਦੋਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਖਾਲਿਸਤਾਨੀ ਜਥੇਬੰਦੀਆਂ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਚਲੋ ਜੀ ਖਾਲਿਸਤਾਨ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਤਾਂ ਕਰੀ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਨਾ ਜੀ, ਚੰਗਾ ਮਾੜਾ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਪਤਾ ਇਹ ਕੁਝ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰ ਸਕਦਾ, ਵੀ ਖਾਲਿਸਤਾਨ ਤੇ ਕਰੀ ਜਾਂਦਾ। ਇਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਇਹ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਗੌਰਮੈਂਟ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਵਾ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਅਸਲੀਅਤ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਤੱਕ ਪਹੁੰਚਾਏ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਖਰਾਬ ਕਰਨ ਵਾਲੇ ਲੋਕ ਨੇ। ਇਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਇਹ ਕੋਈ ਨਾ ਖਾਲਿਸਤਾਨ ਬਣਨਾ, ਨਾ ਇਹ ਰੈਫਰੈਂਡਮ ਦੀ ਕੋਈ ਵੈਲਿਊ ਆ, ਜਾਂ ਤੇ ਦਾ ਕੋਈ ਕਿਤੇ ਹੋਇਆ ਹੋਏ ਤੇ ਦੱਸੋ ਦੁਨੀਆ 'ਚ। ਜੇ ਜੰਮੂ ਕਸ਼ਮੀਰ ਦਾ ਰੈਫਰੈਂਡਮ ਸੀ ਉਹਦਾ ਕੀ ਬਣਿਆ? ਉਹ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ। ਅੱਜ ਰੂਸ ਦਾ ਰੈਫਰੈਂਡਮ ਕੀ ਬਣਿਆ? ਉਹ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ, ਮੰਨ ਲਿਆ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੇ। ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਲੀਗਲੀ ਰੈਫਰੈਂਡਮ ਆ ਉਹ ਨਹੀਂ ਲੋਕੀ ਮੰਨਦੇ, ਤੇ ਇਹ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰਿਆਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਬੈਠ ਕੇ ਬਾਹਰ ਦੀ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਦੇ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੀ ਮੈਂਬਰਸ਼ਿਪ ਨਾਲ ਰੈਫਰੈਂਡਮ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਹੋ ਜਾਊਗਾ? ਇਹ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰਿਆਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਬੈਠਾ ਕਰੀ ਜਾਂਦਾ, ਮੂਰਖ ਬਣਾ ਲਿਆ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ। ਜੇ ਉੱਥੇ 500 ਬੰਦਾ ਆਏ ਤੇ 5000 ਕਹਿੰਦਾ, ਜੇ 1000 ਬੰਦਾ ਹੋਏ ਤੇ
Sikhs are just being misled by people like Gurpatwant Singh Pannoon, by organizations like Sikhs for Justice. And Dr. Verma, it's not just about the Canadian government that needs to act, but it's also about what stand the Indian government can take. Like Thekedar ji was also pointing out, perhaps we also need to have a stronger mechanism to reach out to people and tell them that this really is nothing but you being misled. There is absolutely no truth to this ever becoming a reality. This man is making money at your expense, and that's all that is there to it.
I think that's a very good.
ਸ਼ਰਾਬ ਪੀਂਦਾ, ਸਿਗਰਟਾਂ ਪੀਂਦਾ ਤੇ ਇਹ ਸਿੱਖ ਹੋ ਸਕਦਾ? ਜਿਹੜਾ ਮੋਨਾ ਹੋਏ, ਜਿਹੜਾ ਵਾਲ ਕਟਾਉਂਦਾ ਹੋਏ ਔਰ ਸਿੱਖ ਵੀ ਨਾ ਹੋਏ, ਕਿ ਉਹ ਸਿੱਖ ਜੇ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਖਾਲਿਸਤਾਨ, ਜੇ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦਾ, ਉਹ ਆਪ ਤਾਂ ਸਿੱਖ ਹੈ ਨਹੀਂ, ਲੋਕੀ ਤਾਂ ਵੀ ਮੂਰਖ ਬਣੇ ਹੋਏ ਆ। ਸਿਰਫ ਉਹਦੇ ਪ੍ਰਾਪੇਗੰਡਾ ਉਹਦਾ ਇੰਨਾ ਵਾ गुरुद्वारे दे विच या टीवी रेडियो ते प्रोपेगेंडा करदा।
पन्नून जैसे लोगों को बस अपनी फिक्र है और किसी के कोई बिगर कॉज नहीं है, and that really, Monica Verma, is the point that needs to be driven home, and perhaps there needs to be a better mechanism to do that as well, something perhaps the Indian government should also look at.
I think a huge plus with this government is the way it is reaching out to the diasporic communities. Wherever Narendra Modi is visiting, whichever country he goes to, he always makes a point that some sort of an event is organized where these members of the diasporic community are able to attend and listen to his vision. So I think, something similar is possible in the case of Canada as well, where an outreach maybe is not possible at the topmost level, but we can put certain levers, we can, pull certain levers, and maybe we can, do some sort of action where this message can be sent to the people of Indian community or people from the Sikh community specifically in Canada, that this is not going to lead anywhere. Because look, Indian Punjab is right now on the path of prosperity. It's it's a known fact that India itself is becoming a huge economy, and your stake, your destiny is linked to this India. And if you talk about things, that ISI is sponsoring this entire referendum, or Pakistan is trying to, draw a wedge between the Hindu community and the Sikh community. If you try to, get into all these kinds of conspiracy theories and all these kinds of demands, then it is not going to be good for your own future. I'm sure these people, when they are visiting India, they are also seeking Indian visa. There are so many other mechanisms through which government can make sure that if you are signing up for causes like these, then you will not be allowed on Indian soil ever. I think that's the kind of thing that all states do. That China does it. China may not be a very good example, but other democracies, if you look at them, since India is a democracy, within a democracy only there are certain mechanisms that we can use and make sure that if you are signing up for the cause of Khalistan, no matter which country you are in, please don't, expect that you'll come to India next and we'll welcome you.
Right. So diplomatically, if nothing else, Ashok Sajjanhar, screws need to be tightened. At some level or the other, it needs to be done. If not at the government level, not at the highest level, at some level, there needs to be some sort of screening mechanism that if you are someone who actively voices your opinion about being in favor of a separate Khalistan or are indulged in any sort of anti-India acts, then you will have to pay the price for it. There will be repercussions.
No, absolutely. I think there are a large number of ways in which, in parallel, we need to operate, and I'm sure it's happening. But maybe it needs to be further strengthened. It needs to be further energized because one is in terms of the narrative. We have to build a narrative that all this, what they are trying to do, this is fraud. Has no future at all. There's no possibility whatsoever, and that they are all being taken for a ride when they are going in for these referenda and so on and so forth. The other is, I think we have to use the policies of, what is known as Sam Dam Dand Bhed, and in terms of many of these, those who have Canadian citizenship, they want Indian visas. And now we have been able to identify a large number of them. They can be blacklisted, of course, if they are working against the territorial integrity and sovereignty of your country, then of course, we are not going to be welcoming them to our country. So they can be blacklisted. They will not be allowed to come to India. Even as far as Indians are concerned, when I'm sure we are aware, and if they come here, they can be sort of, I'm sure the government has a large number of avenues so that, we can reach out to them, we can counsel them, we can tell them. So there are very many different ways. Our High Commission possibly needs to be more proactive in reaching out to all these. The Indian community which is there, because we've seen just yesterday, in Brampton, the mayor was booed and he was shot down because of all these pro-Khalistani posters. Right. So that community which is totally opposed to such a referenda and to such activities on the soil of Canada, because all this leads to hate crime, all this leads to criminal action, as we've seen even in the United Kingdom. Of course, that was being done by another community there in the United Kingdom, in Leicester and Birmingham. But here it is the same community, and it leads to problems as far as our own Indian community is concerned. So I think they can get together, and their own elected representatives, they can reach out to them and try to make sure that such activities at the local level are also not allowed, not encouraged, and are and are put down with a very strong hand.
Absolutely, the stronger measures are needed at all levels. Diplomatically, yes, India also needs to raise this. Perhaps the High Commission needs to lodge a stronger protest like they have been. There were advisories that were also issued for students, especially in Canada, right after we saw spate of attacks on temples being burglarized across the country of Canada. We saw these kind of posters come up. We saw these kind of protests even on the eve of Diwali, where we saw two groups that almost came to blows in a parking lot. It was a mob of 500 to 700 strong men who were chanting slogans for a separate Khalistan, and all the police could do was stand there and watch on as mute spectators. That happened in Canada. Even to that incident, we've had absolutely no remark or no response coming to the fore from the government there, and that's really the unfortunate bit. So there has to be a tighter hand as far as dealing with this issue is concerned, both diplomatically and in other ways. But the message needs to be sent out loud and clear, and I'm sure the Indian government is looking to do that. But for now, we are hoping that someone from the Canadian government, if no one else, then at least the High Commissioner here in India comes out and clarifies why his government is silent on all this. I thank my panelists for joining us here on this broadcast with your perspective. With that, we're shifting focus on plain speak to another big story that we're tracking here, and that is the Delhi Liquorgate saga. It's only escalating with each passing day, because today there was another twist that came to the fore. Accused number 11 in the case, Dinesh Arora, is all set to turn a prover. This afternoon, he told the court that he accepts the charges against him and he is willingly turning an approver in the case. The court recorded that he was not making this request under duress. Now, Dinesh Arora is accused by the CBI of allegedly receiving kickbacks from liquor manufacturers who were granted licenses under the excise policy, the same policy that now stands withdrawn by the Delhi government. Now, remember, Deputy Chief Minister of the National Capital, Manish Sisodia, was at the helm of affairs of this particular policy, which is why he is under the scanner. He has been raided in the past. His bank accounts have been searched. He's also been questioned by the agency over this alleged scam. Now, with this new twist in the case, the Aam Aadmi Party, Manish Sisodia and Arvind Kejriwal face a big litmus test of propriety. One of being a corruption-free party and a corruption-free government, because that's really the plank that the Aam Aadmi Party rose to power on. They planned that they would be a party with a difference. They would be a government that would be clean, that would be rid of corruption, unlike all the other traditional parties in the country. That's the political pitch they made. Unfortunately, many believe they're not walking the talk today. As far as this big controversy is concerned and this big development in the Liquorgate scam is concerned, here why it's so significant. I'll break it down for you. The first big issue at hand is, today, while Dinesh Arora told court that he was willingly wanting to turn approver, he accepted the charges against him, which means prima facie that points to wrongdoing in the excise policy if he is accepting the allegations that have been made by the agency against him. Point number 2 of why this is significant. Dinesh Arora is someone who was in the inner circle as far as his policy is concerned. So he can expose bureaucrats who were allegedly bribed in the Delhi government by multiple manufacturers who wanted licenses. Dinesh Arora can also spill beans on the alleged kickbacks from these liquor licenses. To what extent were they made? Who received them? Where exactly did the buck stop? All of those details perhaps could be spilled once Dinesh Arora turns approver in this case. Who was the kingpin behind this alleged Delhi liquor scam? That also can be revealed as Dinesh Arora will now become a state witness when he turns approver. The identity of netas, the identity of businessmen who allegedly benefited from this policy, that too perhaps will be revealed in a matter of time. And let's not forget why all these speculations, because Dinesh Arora is believed to be a close aide of the Delhi Deputy Chief Minister Manish Sisodia. Remember, Sisodia is accused number 1 as far as the FIR in this excise policy alleged scam is concerned. Those are the significant developments that have come to the fore as far as the Liquorgate saga goes, which is why tonight on Plain Speak, we're asking if Dinesh Arora decides to become the approver, if he actually does become the approver or a witness in this case, will that spell more trouble for Manish Sisodia?
ये बात दावे के साथ कह सकता हूं कि मनीष सिसोदिया, जैसा अरविंद केजरीवाल कहते हैं कि बहुत जल्दी जेल में जाएगा, इलेक्शन से पहले जाए बाद में जाए, ये नहीं कह सकता, मगर वो जेल में जरूर जाएगा। और हम अभी से उसके लिए ये मांग करते हैं कि उसको दिल्ली तिहाड़ जेल में ना भेजा जाए, उसको पहले से किसी दूसरी जेल में भेजा जाए।
Vineet Goenka, spokesperson of the BJP, joins me on this broadcast. Political analyst Ravi Srivastava is also with me. But before we get into the politics of it, I want to get in advocate Ashwini Dubey. As far as turning an approver or turning a witness is concerned of any accused, this is not the first case that we would see it. It has happened multiple times. It has helped multiple cases, agencies to crack multiple cases and take them to the logical conclusion. But as far as this particular case is concerned, and correct me if I'm wrong, the fact that Dinesh Arora wants to be a witness, wants to be an approver, does mean that he is accepting the allegations that the agency is making against him. Doesn't that open a Pandora's box, and doesn't that eventually the trail would lead to the man who was at the helm of affairs in this particular case, which is Manish Sisodia?
Is this question to me? I have to answer this question.
Yes, Mr. Dubey.
Yes. So the first we have to see the definition of accomplice, the evidence at a case when there is no direct evidence incorporated somebody's involvement, despite the fact that there are circumstantial evidences, but there is no direct evidence to corroborate and to bring into domain the public, the main offender, then the approver comes in the play. The approver is in fact one of the accused. So the evidence which is used to corroborate such approver's testimony must be an independent evidence and should be able to connect the accused with the crime. Look, the allegations here are very serious in nature. the Lieutenant Governor has recommended for the CBI investigation into the conscientious Delhi excise policy of the Arvind Kejriwal government after a report by the Chief Secretary which established prima facie violation of GNCT Act. And the excise policy in question, opposed by the civil society, religious groups, educational institutions, parents' bodies, and opposition like, was brought into the middle of the deadly delta with the COVID pandemic. Now, the two questions, the major question which is to be established here to the prosecution, it is not too easy to prove this case, irrespective of the fact that one of the accused has turned approver. The initial and essential question to consider is whether, even as an accomplice, the approver is a reliable witness. So he himself is an accused. So whether he is a reliable witness, that court will look into. And if the answer to this question is against the approver, then there is an end of the matter. And no question as to whether his evidence is corroborated or not false to be considered. Means that appreciation of an approver's evidence has to satisfy a double test. His evidence must show that he is a reliable witness, and that is the test which is common to all witnesses. So admittedly, he is an accused. But the allegations or the report which has been submitted by Chief Secretary to the Lieutenant Governor prima facie established that there is a serious violation of Rule 57 of the Act, 1993 Act, which mandates the Chief Secretary to flag any deviation from the laid down procedures to the Lieutenant Governor. And the second, if the above test is satisfied, the second test which still remains to be applied is that approver's evidence must receive the sufficient corroboration. So other evidences are needed. Not only the Mr. Arora's evidence is needed or his statement before the court is needed. As of now, it is all right. But when the charge sheet is taken, matter is taken into the charge sheet and matter is taken to the conviction, in that cases there are some concrete evidence is needed to implicate the kingpin in this matter. So that is why the accomplice this statement should be in consideration with Section 114 of the Evidence Act, which empowers the court to presume the existence of certain facts and illustration in express terms say that an accomplice is unworthy of credit unless he is corroborated in material particulars. Yes.
Right. So him turning an approver doesn't really make the job completely easy for the agency. Perhaps this is 1/4 of the job done, but it really is for the agency to ensure there is enough evidence to substantiate the claims that this particular man is going to make when he does turn approver, and that really is going to be the challenge. But at some point, prima facie, there was wrongdoing, at least on some aspects of it. The fact that the LG was not taken in the loop. And Ravi Srivastava, is that something the Aam Aadmi Party or the Delhi government can completely shy away from?
Poonam, absolutely not. I hope you must have heard the press conference by Saurabh Bharadwaj just an hour before or so. He has clarified it that number of such allegations will be made. And another 25 days, you will see the full soap opera of this happening. Every day, one person will be propped up, somebody will be bribed, some accused will be brought in, some Sukesh Chandrasekhar will be brought in. I hope you recall very well, being a journalist, that before Punjab election, Arvind Kejriwal was almost declared a terrorist. There was a letter came from the Sikh for justice, and that letter said that he is a person who is accused. He stayed with this fellow and that fellow, and that letter was sent by Shri Channi to Shri Amit Shah. Shri Amit Shah sent it for an inquiry. That inquiry, nobody saw till date that what actually happened in that inquiry. So such are the baseless, fabricated, concocted things happening. Let them do it. 14th November, let the person make a statement. Like the learned advocate had said just now, this has got no meaning because the whole thing has to be corroborated before the court of law. There should be incontrovertible, concrete evidence. That's the scrutiny of the Honorable Court. Till then, this is all farce, bogus, and has got no meaning.
Mr. Goenka, it's completely bogus. It's all before elections. Suddenly, all those who are being accused of taking a bribe from one side are perhaps being bribed from the other side. Perhaps they're being bribed to speak up against the Aam Aadmi Party and Manish Sisodia, the number 2 in the party, because the BJP is completely rattled.
Ram to you and all the viewers who are watching this show. One, not only in India and across the world, chief ministers of the state or the province are elected to solve problem. Unfortunately, in this Delhi, he is the problem himself. Deputy Chief Minister is accused, and not only accused, his very close friend, his very close aide, Dinesh Arora, has turned approver. Now, I think if he has left with some morality, he should resign. Let there be a free and fair investigation which is going on. And why do I believe that there is a wrongdoing done by Deputy Chief Minister? Number one, I have never seen him doing a PowerPoint presentation on anything. For last 7 years, he's been there, and I personally have been monitoring him for the last 10 years since the Anna agitation. But he did a PowerPoint presentation on equitable distribution of liquor, how liquor should be drank, how it will be equitable, how people will have access to liquor. The Aam Aadmi Party never paid attention to the problem of pollution, or never paid problem to the problems of Delhi. They reduced DTC to a mere joke, but they concentrated their attention how to make millions and millions in this particular league. They have given discounts per box beyond what you and I can recognize to the retailers. They have made cartels which are not permitted under the this Excise Act, where a manufacturer makes a cartel with the distributor, which has not been seen across the country. I have nowhere in India seen that the person who is accused can investigate himself. They have given rights to the wholesaler to investigate. If there is an investigation, there is a reason to believe that there was a counterfeit in the liquor. They have increased the commission from 2% to 12%. Nowhere in India you see this high percentage of commissions being given. Not only this, they increased the number of shops to which you can't believe, 3 per ward. They've increased the number of hours of selling.
Now, these are the allegations, Mr. Goenka, the BJP has been making.
Decrease the number of dry days to increase the number of sales. Now, this all was done so that they can satisfy their partners who are into this business. And I think Dinesh Arora is going to make all that statement which will nail this to kingpins. Manish Sisodia already is accused. He has been named there. Along with him, there are a couple of other people who have been named in this particular part. I think Kejriwal ji should suspend him, or he should resign by himself till the investigation is going on. This is a serious crime. दिल्ली की जनता को कोई राहत तो नहीं दिया, लेकिन उनको दारू पिलाने के लिए तो उन्होंने बहुत सारा काम किया. They have never thought on education. They have never thought on DTC buses, but they did this corruption, which is shameful, and I condemn this act.
Now, Mr. Goenka, the BJP has been making these allegations time and again. Ravi Srivastava, I do see you putting your hand up. I'll come back to you, but I just want to ask a follow-up question to Mr. Goenka. Like Ashwini Dubey also was pointing out, this is not a big win, so to say, that Dinesh Arora, an accused, has become an approver. The agency will still have to corroborate what he's saying with evidence. Not circumstantial one at that, substantial one at that.
My learned friend,
because
and you rightly
because
said
he too is an accused.
See,
how reliable is he going to be as a witness?
Good. You and my learned friend both are right that this is not an easy win. There is no win. Even if tomorrow Manish Sisodia has been, framed, he has been arrested, and there is if he gets some punishment, even then there is no win. We as citizens have lost. We have lost 7 years. We have lost the opportunity to convert this particular state into a good state. So we will always lose under Aam Aadmi Party. There is no second question in this. But this particular gentleman turning himself into an approver will make the tasks of CBI and the investigating agencies little easier, because he is now going to cooperate and tell under oath that what he did, where it did him, and where did this money come from. Did Vijay Nair, who was arrested by CBI, or Samir Mahendru, who was arrested, did they transfer 1 crore rupees to this so-called Radha Industries? What is Radha Industries? Who are there? Who is the gentleman in Kolkata who benefited? What was the link with Satyendra Jain in this particular case? Did Abhishek Boyanpalli have some relation with this? Now, these are the questions which comes to me as a common man, and I'm trying to put this to everybody in Aam Aadmi Party through your channel.
Right.
That who is Mahendru? Who is Vijay Nair?
Right, and as the agency's job to join those dots, Ravi Srivastava, the agency would be doing that, election or not.
And
just because we have an election a few days away, does that mean agency should halt their investigation?
Allow me one sentence. If they were not wrong, why didn't they send an official spokesperson? Why they have to fight through some proxy? They should have sent some official spokesperson.
The gentleman should be told clearly that it is not my prerogative if official spokesperson is not there.
I'm not questioning you, sir. I'm not questioning you. You are a victim.
I don't care. I tell you frankly, I don't care.
You won't care whether the Aam Aadmi Party does not care. Aam Aadmi Party's sympathizers don't care for me and the citizens.
None of your
gentlemen, let's come back to the issue at hand. Gentlemen, I request you to please come back to the issue at hand. And Vineet Goenka, you made your point.
They should have sent
Yeah, now allow me. Allow me to
don't care, we know that. You don't care. Arvind Kejriwal doesn't care, we know that. You don't have to loudly say that. We know that you don't care. You have put all of us in problem.
Vineet Goenka, I gave you your time. Vineet Goenka, you made your point. You made the allegations. And Ravi Srivastava, yes, the Aam Aadmi Party will have some answering to do. But should the agencies halt their investigation because an election is coming up? Because every time every time an investigation coincides with an election, it's always made political. That the opponents are rattled, it's because of elections, and that is why the investigation is on.
No, actually...
That's Ravi Srivastava's view, right?
Actually, come on, yaar.
Which is fine. We've called Ravi Srivastava on the panel to have his view, so let him have his view. Let him have his
Ravi Srivastava is
Go ahead, Mr. Srivastava.
Not yours. No, Poonam, first of all, those talking about the education policy should not speak a word about it if the Prime Minister has to make it in a tent which is demolished the next day. And they should not talk about the hospital where 150 bodies were lying and 2 people alive were about to be cremated. So I don't need a lecture on the health and the education from anybody. Now, second thing I want to say
is Manish Sisodia accused or not? Whether he will go in jail or not.
Mr. Goenka, you asked a question. Let Ravi Srivastava answer.
Why is so impatient?
Even if you are a proxy, I have no problem. But at least answer.
Why are you impatient? Why are you impatient? That court will decide, not you, neither me. Why you are bothered?
Why are you so instigated?
Why you are so upset now? You
I don't understand why you are so
You have
instigated.
spoken your words.
Are you
now
involved? Why are you so instigated?
Come on, yeah.
Calm down, sir. Please.
I'm not a party of chores like you. Please.
Gentlemen, I request you all to be civil,
please,
gentlemen. Gentlemen, Vineet Goenka and Ravi Srivastava, please, I request you to be civil. Let's come back to the issue at hand. I am running out of time. Last few minutes, Ravi Srivastava, I'd like to give to you.
I would like to ask you one simple thing.
You are a professional hacker.
Notification or not? Tell me
Just
this
start
one
you
particular
at
question.
that
Why is
BJP is the party of goons and you are one of them. He said it.
Ravi Srivastava.
You are reflecting your upbringing, sir. I have no problem, sir.
Ravi Srivastava and Mr. Goenka, I request you to please keep this civil, not take any personal pot shots at anyone. Let's come back to the issue at hand. Vineet Goenka, you made your point. Ravi Srivastava,
one, he is not
rebut.
official. Two, he is using.
It doesn't matter, sir. It doesn't matter.
But you have to.
He's here on the panel with you. You made your point, and I want Ravi Srivastava to come back and respond. Yes, Srivastava. Yes, Mr. Srivastava, go ahead.
See, Poonam, my issue is simple. That 4 months the inquiry is going on, not even a rupee has been found. We are talking about 1 crore rupee, some Amit Arora transferred to Dinesh Arora. Is the money given in the darkness? It's in an open bank account. The bank account number is there. Go trace it. As I said, that talking about 4,000 crore scam, 5,000 crore scam, 10,000 crore scam. Not a single penny has been found. All these are baseless allegations and they will not stand the scrutiny of the law. That is most important. And that is nothing.
All of it is in the realm of investigation. All of it is in the realm of allegations now, and it is up to the agency to prove them. The fact that an accused has turned a prover or a witness in the case is no milestone for the agency to celebrate. They really have to keep their job going because it is going to come down, it is going to boil down to whether or not the agency can substantiate these allegations that they are making in the FIR in the court of law, and that's really where the proof of the pudding lies. I thank you all, gentlemen, for joining us here on this broadcast. With that, we're slipping into a quick break here on this edition, but lots lined up for you on CNN News 18. Don't go anywhere.
That there will be no interference in the universities, not only by the government, but by any source. Only then they were able to persuade me to resume the duties of Vice Chancellor.
നമുക്ക് ഗവർണർ എടുത്തുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്ന ഏതറ്റം വരെയും പോകുന്ന ഒരു നിലപാടിനെ നിയമപരമായിട്ടും ഭരണഘടനാപരമായിട്ടും നമുക്ക് ഫലപ്രദമായി എങ്ങനെ പ്രതിരോധിക്കാമെന്ന കാര്യം പാർട്ടി കൃത്യമായിട്ട് ചർച്ച ചെയ്ത് തീരുമാനത്തിലെത്തിയിട്ടുള്ളതാണ്. ഏതറ്റം വരെയും പോകാം. അത് പിന്നെ ഏതറ്റം വരെയും പോകാമെങ്കിൽ എന്തുവാവാം. അതാണ് സർക്കാരിന് ആവശ്യമായ നിലപാട് സ്വീകരിക്കാം. ബില്ലുകൾ തടഞ്ഞു വെച്ചിരിക്കുകയാണ്. ബില്ലുകൾ തടഞ്ഞു വെച്ചതുമായിട്ട് ബന്ധപ്പെട്ട് നിയമപരമായതും ഭരണഘടനാപരവുമായിട്ടുള്ള പ്രശ്നങ്ങൾ എങ്ങനെയൊക്കെ കൈകാര്യം ചെയ്യണമെന്നുള്ള കാര്യം ആലോചിച്ചുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുകയാണ്, ഗവൺമെൻറ് ആലോചിച്ചുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുകയാണ്. ഗവർണറെ ചാൻസലർ സ്ഥാനത്ത് കേരള ഗവൺമെൻറ്റിൻ്റെ നിയമത്തിൻ്റെ അടിസ്ഥാനപ്പെടുത്തിയിട്ടാണത് യഥാർത്ഥത്തിൽ അധികാരം കിട്ടിയിട്ടുള്ളത്. ആ അധികാരം നൽകേണ്ടതുണ്ടോ എന്ന കാര്യം ചർച്ച ചെയ്യേണ്ടുന്ന അവസ്ഥയിലേക്കാണ് കാര്യങ്ങൾ വന്ന് നിൽക്കുന്നത്. ആവശ്യമായ നിലപാട് നമുക്ക് സ്വീകരിക്കേണ്ടി വരും.
Okay, my colleague Neetu is with us right now to bring us more context. Neetu, we played out for our audiences a few minutes ago a governor's response to the media. And just seeing his anger, that kind of anger from a government official seems unprecedented. Could you bring us more context as to what's brought him to this point? What is the context to this story? And then tell us what we have to look forward to today, please.
See, the governor was quite angry today, saying that he will not speak to two regional media channels, two Malayalam channels, Kairali News and Kairali TV and Media One. He says that they are running a propaganda against them and they are comrades masquerading media persons, and so that is why that is a response that we saw from Kochi, from Kerala Governor Arif Mohammed Khan, quite unprecedented, and he's asking the reporters of two channels to get out from that space where he was about to respond. Now, looking forward today, what we have is that this is the last day of Chancellor that the Governor as Chancellor has given to the Vice Chancellors to respond. He had sent show cause notice to 11 of them, and they have time till today. So 6 of them have already responded, and we are expecting that the others is also most likely to submit their response by today. So it's after that the governor will take into consideration all this, and then he'll take a decision on this. So it was after the Supreme Court verdict on one of the vice chancellors, that is a vice chancellor of APJ Abdul Kalam Technological University. It was after that Supreme Court order which found that appointment not valid because it did not fulfill the UGC guidelines. So based on that, the governor is saying that all these 11 vice chancellors appointments do not fulfill. So based on the Supreme Court order, he has to do that. As Chancellor, it was a governor himself who had appointed all these 11 people on the recommendations from the Search and Selection Committee.
Face off between the governor, Arif Mohammed, who you can see on the left side of your screens, and the Kerala government continues. This is just one more chapter. You might remember that a little while ago, the governor had given a show cause notice to 9 university vice chancellors. 6 out of the 9 have responded. These VCs have moved the Kerala High Court last Wednesday against the show cause notice issued to them by the governor. Remember, what the governor was alleging was that the appointment process of the vice chancellors violated the University Grants Commission norms, and because of that, they must resign. Now, I want to take you through reactions to this story, then we'll connect with my reporter on the ground.
I have repeatedly said it and I'm repeating, please. Whatever you want to do, first do it, then I will say. I have said I consider media very important. I have always responded to media.
Welcome back. Breaking news now coming in, and a big blow to the Congress party. A commercial court in Bengaluru has now directed Twitter to temporarily block the Twitter handles of Indian National Congress and its mass movement, the Bharat Jodo Yatra. This is over a copyright infringement suit that was initiated by MRT Music, alleging that these handles illegally use the sound records of the film KGF Chapter 2. Harish Upadhyay, my colleague, now joins me for more on this. This is a big jolt coming in from for the Congress party, isn't it?
Absolutely. This is the Additional City Civil Court which has passed this ex parte order and has asked Twitter to take down or temporarily block Indian National Congress account and also the Bharat Jodo account. It has also directed Twitter to take down 3 tweets. These are tweets that have used this music. Remember, last week there was a complaint filed at the Yeshwantpur police station in Bengaluru by the manager of MRT Music. That was once again naming Rahul Gandhi, Jairam Ramesh and Supriya Srinathe. That was invoking Copyright Act, the Information Technology Act and several sections of the IPC as well. Now, the same managers, the same music company has approached this additional civil court in the city and has managed to get this ex parte order.
Right, so big jolt there coming to the fore as far as the Bharat Jodo Yatra is concerned. They had approached court. An order has now come to the fore for the filmmakers, for the music company there that alleged infringement of the copyright by the Congress party. Now, in the last couple of days since the petitioner actually went to court and this order now coming out, Harish, has there been any reaction that has come to the fore from the Congress party?
The Congress party hasn't responded so far. Remember, this initial complaint lodged at the Yeshwantpur police station was last Friday. Ever since then, we haven't seen any reaction coming in from the state unit as well on whether they want to have any sort of discussion with MRT Music, which is the complainant in this case. Neither have the Congress leaders come out justifying on why they used the KGF2 music. Remember, this is not the first time that the Congress party has been in soup for using images in the music in their 40% Sarkar commission campaign as well. There was a photo of an artist used, and the artist came out and said that his photo was used without taking his prior permission and embarrassed the Congress party. Right. Now, this issue of using a popular music and using it without any sort of understanding or agreement with the company which produced it.
Right, like you've been mentioning, and it's not just about these two particular instances of copyright infringement. The Bharat Jodo Yatra in itself, right since it began, has been mired in controversy one after another in every single state that it's been in so far.
Absolutely. In Kerala, it was the photo with a minor hijab girl.
Right, sorry to interrupt you there, Harish. I'll come back to you. But Sangeet Inagi of the Congress party now with me on the phone line. So thank you so much for speaking with us. 2 Twitter handles have now been temporarily blocked over copyright infringement. How do you respond?
It appears to be an ad interim order, ex parte ad interim order. We need to receive the copy of the court and then we will be able to respond to the court. That is one thing. But the court order, as has been depicted in the media and has also been coming in the local websites and details, it only says that the defendants are restrained from using that copyrighted material. So if there is a copyright violation, or if it is really a copyrighted material or not, that also requires to be examined by the court in the due course of the trial. And also if there is any violation or usage of that copyrighted material without any permission. And only to that extent, till the consideration of the response on the other side, the court has granted an ad interim order. And this is only an interim arrangement made.
So you don't see this as a hiccup to the Bharat Jodo Yatra?
No, it is only pertaining to those usage of the copyrighted material as claimed by the plaintiff. The court has granted an interim order. It is not complete blockage of the website or blockage of the Twitter handles.
Right.
It is only to an extent of usage.
Right. Sangeet Inagi, thank you so much for speaking with us here on CNN News 18. The Congress does not see this as a jolt, but nonetheless an ad interim order coming to the fore and 2 of their Twitter handles being blocked, at least temporarily. We'll see how Rahul Gandhi or the party leadership responds. But for now, that's a wrap from me.
Namaste, Jai Hind, and thank you for joining us here on this edition of The Right Stand. I'm Anand Narasimhan, and ladies and gentlemen, time and again here on your show, we have addressed this issue of Hindu hate or Hinduphobia, oftentimes misconstrued or projected as Hinduphobia or fear of Hindus. Somewhere, there is no reason to fear Hindus. The reason is that it all stems from hate. Oftentimes, we've highlighted intellectuals, we've talked about authors and researchers who have been called out for trying to push an effort to dismantle Hinduism, Hindutva, etc. On the other hand, we've also profiled authors, researchers, thinkers, and of course, sociologists who have come out and said that there is, or who have called out this agenda against India and against Hindus. But one question that always rankled, and it's also lingered, is why? Why would a group of intelligent individuals, educated individuals, understanding and those who can drive opinions, such individuals or groups, push an agenda against India and Hindus. Where does it stem from? Now, an American sociologist, Professor Salvatore Babones, comes out and says it comes from deep-rooted resentment, anti-Semitic, just like they had with the Jews, now they have it with Hindus. How can they grow? How can they come forward? How can they? They need to be quelled, they need to be suppressed, they need to be erased. This resentment, that's what is fueling this Hindu messiah, that is what is fueling this agenda. Be it Leicester, be it Mississauga, or be it New Jersey, or be it any other part of the world where there is this huge misinformation using the word Hindu, Hindus, Hinduism, Hindutva, different ways to brand a nation's prime minister elected twice with overwhelming majority, voted, rated the most popular leader across the world, among the tallest of the global leaders. To brand him as a Hindu nationalist prime minister comes with a certain agenda. To deliberately pick up indexes and data points that will show a nation which is growing at as the fastest nation in the world at an economic pace. A nation that is poised to become the world's third largest economy very soon. Such a nation to portray it as a nation that is perhaps in a huge amount of decay as society is concerned, huge amount of penury with its people concerned, to try and deliberately project it. Is there an agenda, and does it stem from deep-rooted resentment? Salvatore Babones had spoken to CNN News18 and spoken to us here on the Right Stand on the 16th of September 2022. But today, on the 7th of November 2022, he has penned a detailed piece, opinion piece, on firstpost.com. Do peruse it. I'm just putting out some of the salient features, the highlights here. What does he say? Professor Babones says, anti-Hindu Western intellectuals do not fear the rise of India. They resent it. So it's not coming, this hate is not coming from, it's not stemming from hate also. He says it's resentment. They just don't want it. Then, just as Western anti-Semites are offended by the success of Israel, Western anti-Hinduists are offended by the success of India. They can't accept the idea of a strong, vibrant, independent Hindu majority country. They would much rather keep India weak and poor, just as their ancestors did centuries ago. That's the perception built, isn't it? You're a nation of snake charmers. All you can wear is a dhoti, half below the waist, naked above the waist. That's the kind of perception they have about this country. Pichhada hua, that has no knowledge, that needs to be educated, that's uncivilized. They want to push that, continue to push that perception. This nation, Vishwaguru, impossible. That's the core instinct. That's what Professor Babones says. The anti-Hindu movement wants to turn India into a pariah state on the Israeli model. So what they did with Israel, or attempt to do with Israel, they now want to do with Bharat, ladies and gentlemen. Decrying the Hindu messiah, that's what we are trying to understand. Let's go across to our panelists. But before that, a short excerpt of the conversation that we had here on the Right Stand with Professor Babones on the 16th of September this year. Your opinion piece on India at 75 through some very interesting observations, especially those about the independent democracy watchers who you believe perhaps owe India an apology. Why do you say so?
Well, my opinion piece is based on a research paper that's been published in Quadrant magazine and now republished on the print in India. The research paper is an examination of the three major democracy organizations: Freedom House in the United States, the Economic Intelligence Unit in the UK, and the Varieties of Democracy Institute in Sweden. In that research paper, I examine literally all of the reasons they give for India's troubling decline in democracy since 2018, and have found errors, inconsistencies, and I think, outright misrepresentations in all of them.
What did you find? Was this agenda against India as a country, or was this agenda against the BJP and more specifically against Prime Minister Narendra Modi, a popularly elected Prime Minister with a larger mandate the second time around?
I don't think these organizations are anti-Modi or anti-BJP, and they're certainly not anti-India. However, these organizations reflect the opinion of the intellectuals, of the experts, of the journalists, of the academics who report back to them. That is, these organizations don't collect their own information. They use information that's out in the public sphere, and they hire academics and journalists to write sections of their reports for them. So a report from one of these organizations may be 250 pages long. The India section is a couple of pages, and that's written on behalf of the organization by somebody. So I suspect what's happened is that these reports on India simply reflect the overall opinion of India's intellectual class. Not just India's intellectual class, but the expat or NRI intellectual class who are concerned with Indian matters. Look, a professor at Harvard who studies India, who may be of Indian background, has much more influence on a report like this than an Indian author, in India who is not connected to international organizations. The report reflects the politics of those who are contributing to it, not necessarily any conspiracy by these organizations to downgrade India.
So the agenda to downgrade India, and it stems from a deep-rooted resentment saying, how can this nation of Hindus, snake charmers, rise? These pichdas, these people who need to be civilized by us, we taught them civilization, we taught them. How can they be? And it is also being stemmed or penned by those who have gone from here and have embraced this whole Western elitist notion about Bharat. Now let's try and look at some of the instances. There's a report on Leicester clashes that's now come out, which comes out and says there is no Hindutva or RSS extremism involved, whereas it was painted as a Hindutva and RSS-driven narrative. Again, politically inclined, fueled narrative. Group of influencers peddled a very, very fake narrative. The influencers have links to terrorism. The fake narrative peddled to instigate violence. This is what happened with the Leicester clashes. This is the reality that's coming through. So once again, the academia, the intelligentsia coming together, ganging up to create these narratives that will push a model similar to the Israeli model. Just other them, separate them, isolate them, and then box them into a corner and keep them there. This is caught out, and that's what was caught out, and that's why Dr. Chris Allen at Leicester had to step down, because his agenda was called out. Hindu bashing, is it steeped in resentment, is the question that we ask. And where does this stem from? How many agree with Professor Babonis? How many would perhaps expand on this and also call out the academia in the West? He says they've ganged up with the Islamists. The Western elite have ganged up with the Islamists to push this narrative, which is also stemming from academia, who claim to have authority on India. Well, whether they do or not, or are they coming with a particular prism, we'll get into that. Dr. Makarand Paranjpe, Professor JNU, former Director of the Indian Institute of Advanced Studies, with us, joining us from Florida. Makarandji, namaste. Such a pleasure to have you on this show. It's been a long while, and I'm glad to be on your show. And I'm glad that it's happening. Vasik, writer and commentator and counter-extremist analyst, is also joining us from London. Vasikji, namaste. Thank you very much. Pleasure having you on the show. Sarah L. Gates, Dharmic Ecology, Hindu human rights activist, joining us from Australia. Sarah ji, I apologize for keeping you up so late. I know it's late in the night, but it's very kind of you to have made the time and agreed to stay up and speak with us here on the show. And Dr. Vijay Lakshmi Vishwanathan is with us, author of Snakes in the Ganga, co-author with Rajiv Malhotra ji. Vijay Lakshmi ji, you were very, very candid when I was there on the book launch, when you called out the academy about what they are propagating and what they are teaching. So
Thank you so much for having me, Anand. Yeah.
So let me start. Makaranji and Vijay Lakshmi ji, you're both joining us from Florida. I wonder what's happening there that the intelligentsia has gathered there. But let me ask you, Dr. Vijay Lakshmi ji, let me ask you first. Would you agree with Professor Babonis when he says that this stems from a certain deep-rooted resentment, those who are offended by the rise of Bharat, this academia pushing this narrative?
Namaste, Anand. Yes, partly, but I would also blame the Indian elites and Indian educational institutions as well. So, for example, if you look at an up-and-coming, newly minted university like Kriya University in the south, which lacks total competence in Indian knowledge systems, but they have assembled Western academics to earn the credibility as an institution of eminence. Now, this does not come for free. This alliance with Western universities does not come for free. They have alliances with Yale University and MIT, and this doesn't come for free. So what does Kriya give back in return? Kriya gives back a whole lot of data on 200 Indian, just for one study, 200 Indian villages, data on their every family, 10,000 households. They have economic data on them. So that is given to Yale University, and this is in the repository of Yale's big data. Now, so that's one kind of payment. The second kind of payment is they promise to breed a new set of scholars and students on the Western ways of thinking. Now, this is not just limited to social science. Now, if you take economics, there's a Kriya University professor who has joined hands with a professor in Harvard University and Cornell to produce a paper on caste-based, how castes are segregated, and to show segregation based on caste. Now, Professor, there's nothing wrong with that. That is indeed an area that should be studied, fine. But these are so one-sided because Professor Vaidyanathan, who's a great scholar who knows jati-based, varna-based economic systems, has written extensively on this subject to show how caste networks are actually very beneficial to the success of certain communities. But this research, of course, is ignored. So you can easily see that it's a one-way street on this. And Professor Vaidyanathan is cancelled, is never included in any of this. There's another Kriya professor, he's just a master's in neuroscience or something, but he teaches writing in Kriya. And he says IIT, he talks about science education, and even science education is criticized like this. He says IIT is a hotbed of discrimination. IITs survive on casteism. IITs produce caste to continue the myth of merit. This is all from Kriya University. And then he also goes on to saying Ayurveda is inexorably linked to caste and casteism, and promoting Ayurveda equals promoting caste. Now, this is coming out of Kriya. So we have to question how our Indian billionaires who support Kriya University, and Kriya supports this kind of scholarship and in the name of freedom of academic expression, and this whole ecosystem. So we also have to take some blame. We can't just assign all the blame to Western scholars and Western academics, because if we were rooted and grounded in our own Indic knowledge systems and we have a sense of self-worth, we wouldn't be doing this. So it's happening at an individual level. It's also happening at institutional level. The new institutions we are building, unfortunately, are built like this, and that will scale up this whole thing even more.
But the academia or the that we are leaning on to add value and prestige and heft, and like you said, the give and take or the quid counter happens, the quid pro happens, is with a lot which is already leaning in particular way, or it's conditioned or thinking in a particular way. Saraji, one of the interesting things that Professor Babanis told me when I spoke with him in September is that look at how they interpret data. 2010 to 2020, anybody who understands statistics does not make a decade. It makes 11 years. So you should look at it as 2010 to 2019 or 2011 to 2020. But these people in their research papers use the data point 2010 to 2020 because that's when the number fits the narrative, when they are trying to make a case of an index. But he also turns around and says that Freedom House, Economic Intelligence Unit or VDEM, they do not write these papers. They commission it to academia, who send them these reviews. And they send them a one-page review and a note, and they add it to this entire assessment. So where would you stand? Would you agree that there is a deep-rooted resentment? Why would somebody want to have an agenda against a nation they got nothing to do with?
Well, the agenda's it's very old. It goes back and it's just morphed. So you had colonialism, and then you had neo-colonialism, and you had all kinds of different geopolitical strategies in place. And one of those strategies was to fund scholarship. So you had American and British institutions funding scholarship, and they would guide that scholarship so that it was directed in a particular manner, and they would selectively decide what types of topics would be allowed to be studied and so forth. So this has been going on for generations. It's certainly nothing new, and I think that having studied the history of the word use of Indophobia, Hinduphobia and anti-Hindu sentiment, anti-Hindu legislation, there's around nearly, over 200 years of documented usage of these terms throughout the Western media and throughout the Indian media. And each one of those usages is a story in itself. So for every word use, you have to go and read, 10 or 20 other things to find out what context that's in. But there's been absolute vitriolic hatred, pitched against Hindus from so many different directions for such a long time. And I think it's very important not to blur it all together. So you need to know your perpetrators, you need to know your crimes, you need to know who's saying what about whom and when. And it's all very specific and it's all very complex. So I'm reluctant to say that anti-Hindu sentiment, Hindu hatred, Hinduphobia, which is actually a lot older than Islamophobia. It's 60 years older than Islamophobia, and it was coined by a Brit. So I'm reluctant to say it's any type of particular mentality. I think it's very dangerous to start saying it's fear or it's hatred or it's apathy or it's it's resentment, because it is so diverse. When you look at the cases, if you do case studies on what is anti-Hindu hate crimes, anti-Hindu legislation, anti-Hindu policies, anti-Hindu narratives, anti-Hindu historic studies, I mean, this is just so far widely spread, and it's across every domain. It's in media, it's in academia, it's in think tanks, it's in government reports like what we've been talking about. And if you dig down into those references in these reports, some of them are absolutely absurd. And you've just got to wonder what type of academic standards these institutions are upholding. So what I found more recently is the internationalization attempts of political lobbyists, particularly those concerned with Palestine, Kashmir, the CIA plus NRC, the farmers' issues. And then, of course, you've got issues of Islamism. Khalistan was connected to some of those protests, and you've got, major unrest that's been connected to these policies. But it seems like there's agendas to internationalise India's policies or its bills, resolutions, in order to have foreign countries interfere with India's democratic status, its democratic process, its legislation. And I think this is why we're hearing a lot of trumped up allegations. And some of them are just absolutely, absurd. Like, I've read one report, I think it was the London School of Economics, it was something about WhatsApp groups and how BJP IT cells were driving communal hatred. And if you actually read the report, the outcome was that lower caste people, Muslims and other groups, Christians and so many other people, were actually committing the crimes. So it really defeated their whole narrative. It's just so many logical inconsistencies. So, no, I don't think it's just resentment. I do think there's geopolitics at play. I think institutions are accountable. And I think this has been going a long time. And it stems from anti-pagan, anti-Indigenous, anti-native sentiment, which was instrumentalised to colonise the global south. And if they could have their way, I would suspect that they want to balkanise India.
Balkanise
because
India.
It keeps everyone under control. It keeps them fighting.
Correct.
That's my perspective.
No, and you add a lot of weight to that perspective, because Professor Babonas, in his opinion piece on First Post, actually hints upon this. He says that this is how the entire colonialism, this narrative was created, and they want an extension of the same. And somewhere, does it ring a bell, Dr. Paranjpe, when Sarah Elgate says that it gives these nations a reason to interfere with our affairs? to get into, you internationalize India's policies, international laws, so that gives them a reason, oh, this nation needs us to get in, so we are getting in. It justifies their encroaching upon our space. And somewhere this word dismantle rankles. So be it hate, be it resentment, be it offense, be it however, let's just take them down.
Yes, absolutely, Anand. This is not new. 100 years ago, when India was striving for its independence, a similar series of attacks, not just on India's political aspirations, but on its culture, its religion, its civilization were mounted. And we can go back to Sri Aurobindo's wonderful defense of Indian civilization, which was later published, a series of essays that he wrote in his journal Arya, starting in 1914, but it was later published as the Foundations of Indian Culture, where you can see that there is an orchestrated attempt, as you said, to take down India. But here's the silver lining. I mean, I always try to, strategically look at what, we can get from this, from how we can benefit and learn. And this is what Sri Aurobindo says. You understand a particular alliance against India, a particular mentality, and knowing your adversaries, because I'd like to say that Sanatan Dharma has no enemies, but only adversaries, okay? But to be innocent about your adversaries and people who want to destroy you is really foolish. So it gives you Shatru Bodh. That is, you get to understand who the enemy is. And just to add to what the previous two speakers had said, I would call it an alliance, at least when it comes to the intellectual and cultural and civilizational attack on India. I would call it an alliance of red, woke, and green. Now, if we have time, I'll spell it out. Yes, but the red stands for the, the rump, the remnants of the failed leftist, Marxist, Maoist, urban Naxal, call it what you will. All of those splinters and groups which want a weak India internally, breaking India is very convenient for them because they have the delusion that there'll be a proletarian revolution in one form or another, and their outposts in the Western Academy, whether you call them post-colonialists, subalternists, or whatever. So there is the red, and then the woke. Now, this woke alliance is, to me, a quintessential anti-intellectual alliance, anti-critical. They want to bully you into basically suspending your judgment, suspending any rational inquiry, evidence-based thinking, and it's really a programmatic approach to bully you into all kinds of positions of political correctness or incorrectness, as the case may be. And their favorite bugbear, or I might even call it smokescreen, is this whole business of caste, without even understanding that caste and jati, varna and jati are totally different systems. And in fact, it has been proven in Indian political history in the last 75 years that caste alliances and mobilizations are a vehicle of empowerment and upward mobility. And this history they've completely ignored. And finally, we come to the green, and the green is a kind of insidious, worldwide, often Pakistani-funded, think tank, lobbyist, and other coalition of interests, which are, for lack of a better word, we can call them not Islamic but Islamist, which are really attacking, all varieties of Hinduism under the excuse of attacking Hindutva, you see? So you see this alliance of red, woke, and green playing out this anti-India, anti-Hindu narrative in different iterations in the Western world, in the United States, in Canada, then in UK, Australia, New Zealand, everywhere. And now they're attacking Rishi Sunak as well, because he goes to a temple, he celebrates Diwali, they attack Tulsi Gabbard. And so this is going to be relentless. What I want to say is that we should look at it as an opportunity, because when Washington Post, New York Times, The Guardian, BBC, CNN, also your so-called parent or partner channel, when they all attack India, then people like you, Anand, and others in India will stand up and hit back. So this rallying of India and Indian forces, pro-Indian forces, a kind of awakened Hindu conscience all over the world, in UK, in Australia, and in the United States and elsewhere, is a fitting response. And this is really good. We have to wake up and roar. So it's not time for defense anymore. It's time for offense. And I want to go back to what was said earlier for a moment. It is time to actually name names and see how this alliance works in India, and how it's weakening us from within. We have to expose this alliance and create counter narratives, you see, and invite other partners. See, this is a big failure on the part of India, for example, that we are not a part of any conservative alliance anywhere in the world. Whereas the left liberals are completely integrated, for example. So we need to have alliances. We have to reach out to think tanks. We should find common cause. And I'm very grateful to the other panelists who have joined from different parts of the world, because I see like the sparks of a firefly all around. I see signs of this renaissance, signs of new alliances. And I must thank you, Anand, for your, I should say, very persistent campaign, which is highly informative to Indian audiences who tend to, be very ill-informed about this global anti-India and anti-Hindu campaign. So thank you for this. Thank you.
The thing is, I'm trying to rise from 3 feet to about 30 feet, while trying to bring you down from 30,000 feet to about 300 feet. So then everybody can get a perspective which you have. And then when I say all of you, because you've been writing, talking and seeing this. I'm going to bring in Vasik, because thank you for your patience, just allowing everybody to air their thoughts. Vasik, where do you stand on this matter? Would you believe that there are parallels with Israel and with Bharat in terms of when this kind of narratives are fit? And are there alliances that have been stitched, especially among the intelligentsia, to try and drive this narrative? Is there a commonality?
Well, yes, I think there's some truth in that, and I think it's a mixture of a number of things. So, first of all, there appears to be a Western civilizational bias against sovereign nations such as Bharat and Israel. Now, these are relatively new nations that have emerged as a result of the independence, whether that's the formation of Israel or the partition of Bharat and the formation then of Pakistan. But we need to put this into context. Colonialism was bad enough when it first reared its ugly head, but it seems some in the West are hell-bent on shackling Bharat back into the chains of colonialism, both literally and intellectually. Now, the state of Bharat is a secular one, but the civilization for thousands of years has very much been rooted in the Hindu tradition. And what this does is that this poses a threat to Western leftists and Islamist extremists. So for the West, it shows that Bharatiyas are autonomous, sovereign people that can and have succeeded as Bharatiyas in academia, in culture, in economics and philosophy. And what this does is that it leaves Western leftists in a state of rage because they can't act like the world's police and sort out the savages, so to speak. And Western leftists, they hate this. They despise the fact that Bharat can survive without their intervention. And then let's have a look at the Islamists. Now, for Islamists, Bharat is a prime example of a nation that has flourished without the need of a caliphate ruled under Sharia law. So if you have a look at, for example, your population, you've got one of the biggest populations of Muslims. Now, Bharatian Muslims are living their best lives and proving to the Islamist mullahs that freedom of religion is best served in a nation rooted in the Hindu tradition that provides freedom of religion, is best served in a nation rooted in Hinduism, and it is clearly one that is much better than the supposedly one that's ordained by by these Islamist extremists. So if you ask me why there is this unholy alliance between Western leftists and Islamists, well, there's your answer. Bharat is a success story, and that time and time again keeps proving itself against these naysayers. Let's put this again into perhaps economic terms.
Yeah.
So according to the IMF, the World Economic Outlook, the year ending April 2021, the gross domestic product per capita of Bharat in 2021 was projected at over $2,000 at current prices. Now, if you take it back to all the way to 1993, Bharat's GDP per capita was 6.5% of global GDP per capita. So we saw that in this respect, there was a increase of 18.4% in terms of GDP. So you can see that Bharat just keeps outperforming so many other countries. It's not an accident that it is the fifth largest growing economy in the world. It's a fact that it is, and it's a fact that this is through its civilization, through everything that it's gone through, whether it's through colonialism, the terrorist attacks that it faces almost daily from Islamist extremists, from separatists, from some of the surrounding nations that it is, facing in the same way that Israel also faces that. And so when we think about Bharat, we need to be thinking about it being a success story, and this is despite intervention from Western leftists or Islamist extremists. We don't need a caliphate. Bharat is very well served as a secular state and also one with a deep-rooted Hindic tradition.
Right. Now I've run out of time, but I'm going to push this by another 4 minutes. One minute to all our panelists again, just to summarize, saying how do we correct this? What do we do? So I'm going to start with Vasik, go to Dr. Paranjpe, Saraji, and then end with Vijayaji. So yes, Vasik, how do we counter this intelligentsia mafia kind of thing?
Yeah. Well, I think we need to counter. We saw recently in Leicester the removal of an academic from a official review, and the reason why that was the case is because we were calling out some of these naysayers, some of these people who wanted to present something against British Hindus as if they were a threat, or whether the ideology of Hindutva was a threat. And we need to just keep calling them out with facts, with logic, with a good level of intelligence that is not being provided against us. We're being provided with emotions, but if we can provide with logic, with facts, I think we can quite clearly defeat some of these people who are hell-bent on destroying Bharat as a nation.
Counter information, disinformation, and also a very informed counter, if that is provided, that could be a solution. Dr. Paranjpe?
Yes, I think that it has to be countered at multiple levels. At the level of the government and the state, they have to hire lobbyists in Washington, London, and other parts of the world. Let's not be innocent. There's lots of money and lots of, powerful people who are against India, and the government with its resources must, in my view, do more. Secondly, when it comes to civil society and when it comes to India itself, I find that we spend most of our time fighting with each other, attacking each other, and in a way disincentivizing competence. I always say in India we have competence deficit coupled with competence phobia, and that needs to end. We have to open our own minds, and there has to be a healthy spirit of self-criticism amongst us as well. But I think that it's not enough just to attack people. We have to create better books, better research, better, more reliable, narratives of our own, and that's happening slowly. But it won't happen unless we invest a lot of time, energy, and incentivize excellence within India itself.
So incentivize excellence. One is information, start creating a counter mechanism. You also said we need cohesion. Everybody who has the alternative and wants to fight back needs to work together, but also need to up the level of competence internally. Saraji?
I think incentivization is fantastic. We certainly need to incentivize the youth to take up different degrees, especially, and I will say this, humanities. We need to take up dharmic social justice frameworks. We need to draw those social justice frameworks from our traditions. And I do feel very much part of these traditions, and I've done a lot of work to create my own epistemology and methodology that is absolutely drawn from the teachings of my sampradayas. And this should be welcome in academia, because Indigenous knowledge systems are now being protected within academia for every other Indigenous culture around the world except for Bharatias. So we also need to fight this at the systemic level, because we do have human rights. As much as people are entitled to criticise, and they can even make horrible statements about you online, if they're working in a particular industry and they're subject to codes of conduct, or if these institutions have policies, they're meant to protect you. Those policies are in place to make sure that we aren't all hurt by the people who are working in these institutions. And charities, the media, they're subject to certain regulations. Some of them aren't. The Guardian is self-regulating, which is tragic, and they don't listen. But we have to keep making the complaints, and do so in a way which is very legalistic. Rather than complaining about my feelings being hurt, you have to be very legalistic. You have to look at the criteria when you're making a complaint, and you need to be able to demonstrate that those parties have actually breached some type of code. If it's a human rights issue, if it's a civil rights issue, if it's a housing discrimination issue, every level of society has protections in place already. We don't need to tell them not to be anti-Hindu bigots. That's already there. You've got protections. It's just a matter of fighting for your rights. Everybody needs to fight for their rights. They have to be brave. They can't be what Lord Krishna would call impotent cowards. We can't have this anymore. And this attacking each other, bringing each other down, fighting among one another, it's real. It's really crazy. I mean, fighting over whether we should use terms like Hinduphobia or Hinduphobia is just crazy. You're going to throw away 150 years of word usage over what? It doesn't mean, well, it means so many things.
Use
if
both.
You look into it.
You
understand these things, and everybody, we need to work together. We need to uplift one another.
Absolutely.
And be one movement, because our enemies are one.
Very rightly said.
It's almost the fighting for the Ummah. They're fighting for every Muslim on the planet. So we need to think in those terms, and not just for Hindus. Also for other pagan civilizations, other indigenous cultures.
Very rightly said. All
and
indigenous,
Jews.
All indigenous cultures need to be protected, and like you said, that you cannot be impotent cowards. Very rightly said, and more importantly, more need to be taught the basic core Indic systems or the local sampradayas, indigenous sampradayas. So Agastya Gurukulam has to be now not 400 students but 4 million, Vijayaji. So that's what needs to happen. And those who study humanities should have the ability to question their teachers and correct them when they try and subtly tell you that pedophilia is all right.
Yes. Also, till such time, like the other panelists have said, that we build our own drishti to solve these issues. There are some things that we name in the snakes in the Ganga. So one thing we can definitely do is to bring awareness to our billionaires who are, so the support structure has to be dismantled. The support structure that is enabling this kind of narrative to come through and break India, that has to be essentially countered. So we have to essentially dismantle that. So our billionaires are funding that. So we have to call them out and say what is going on, and let's have an open argument. If that's what they feel, then that's fine, but we need to have a debate on these issues. So that is number one. Number two is our own government. For example, the NEP has a lot of issues. They're bringing in these gender ideologies into the classroom for K to 12. So we need to counter them. Our government is sending our bureaucrats to Harvard for training. And what are they getting trained on? Is also the same narrative. They're getting indoctrinated so that they can go back into the bureaucracy and propagate this. So we need to call out our government on this, right? So it's good, fine to blame others, but we also need to, clean up our own house, right? And so we need to call the government on this and say, Niti Aayog has all experts from Harvard to solve problems of India. I think we have enough brain power to, this colonized mentality that we have, right? That anything from the West is great has to go. And we have enough brain power locally that we can use. We have, like I said, professors like Professor Vaidyanathan and others who can bring in and give advice to the government on what needs to be done. They have a better idea as to what India needs as opposed to getting foreign help for these things. So even the government has to be cleaned up. Right? And then at a family level, we should tell our parents that send children abroad for a liberal arts education to not do that, not spend the money till such time that we develop these fields of excellence at home on the ground. So till that time, we can at least stop the leakage of all of this. So why should we spend our hard-earned money on a liberal arts curriculum that is essentially making
Vijay, I have to wind up, but it circles back to what Sara ji, Dr. Paranjpe and Vasim Kasik have also said, that we first need to learn to work together and cohesive and unite, because that's why we always like an other, somebody from the outside to come and do it, because we can't work ourselves together. That's why we are all conversing in English and not Sanskritam or any other original Bharatiya Bhasha. There is a reason why, because everybody said, let us get English because we don't want Hindi. Others said we don't want Tamil. A third said we don't want Bengali or Marathi. So that's where it all got stuck, frankly. And imagine if we were all speaking our own Bharatiya Bhashas, our own cultures, our own knowledge systems would have also been preserved, because that's one way to erase it. It's a longer discussion, and I hope to have that soon with the same panel very, very soon. But for the moment, I have to wind up.
Anand, English is also a Bharatiya Bhasha.
Now,
don't worry.
now.
English is very much a Bharatiya Bhasha. Don't worry.
Now. Namaste. Thank you so much. Always a pleasure. Dhanyavad. Thank you. We're going to take a short break, ladies and gentlemen. When we come back, what's happened in Canada, in Brampton, where once again in a temple, the mayor of the region, Patrick Brown, has been called out because of this brazen anti-Hindu propaganda and, more importantly, an anti-Bharat propaganda. The Khalistani flags being waved, Hindus being derided, trying to create this narrative that Sikhs are separate from Hindustan and Hindus, and that's what is stemming. It's a very, very brazen political effort, dangerous one. We talk about it when we come back. Stay with us.
To these silly and foolish and something they are what they are doing. Do you remember I had offered that I want to be relieved of the Chancellor's position? Why they wrote 4 letters to me, pleading with me. And finally the last letter, draft they sent to me in the Raj Bhavan, which draft will be acceptable to me. I made the amendments. No if and but, and Chief Minister's letter assuring that there will be no interference in the universities, not only by the government but by any source. Only then they were able to persuade me to resume the duties of Vice Chancellor.
നമുക്ക് ഗവർണർ എടുത്തുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്ന ഏതറ്റം വരെയും പോകുന്ന ഒരു നിലപാടിനെ നിയമപരമായിട്ടും ഭരണഘടനാപരമായിട്ടും നമുക്ക് ഫലപ്രദമായി എങ്ങനെ പ്രതിരോധിക്കാമെന്ന കാര്യം പാർട്ടി കൃത്യമായിട്ട് ചർച്ച ചെയ്ത് തീരുമാനത്തിലെത്തിയിട്ടുള്ളതാണ്. ഏതറ്റം വരെയും പോകാം. അത് പിന്നെ ഏതറ്റം വരെയും പോകാമെങ്കിൽ എന്തു ആവാം. അതാണ് സർക്കാരിന് ആവശ്യമായ നിലപാട് സ്വീകരിക്കാം. ബില്ലുകൾ തടഞ്ഞു വെച്ചിരിക്കുകയാണ്. ബില്ലുകൾ തടഞ്ഞു വെച്ചതുമായിട്ട് ബന്ധപ്പെട്ട് നിയമപരമായതും ഭരണഘടനാപരവുമായിട്ടുള്ള പ്രശ്നങ്ങൾ എങ്ങനെയൊക്കെ കൈകാര്യം ചെയ്യണമെന്നുള്ള കാര്യം ആലോചിച്ചുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുകയാണ്. ഗവൺമെൻറ് ആലോചിച്ചുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുകയാണ്. ഗവർണറെ ചാൻസലർ സ്ഥാനത്ത് കേരള ഗവൺമെൻറ്റിൻ്റെ നിയമത്തിൻ്റെ അടിസ്ഥാനപ്പെടുത്തിയിട്ടാണത് യഥാർത്ഥത്തിൽ അധികാരം കിട്ടിയിട്ടുള്ളത്. ആ അധികാരം നൽകേണ്ടതുണ്ടോ എന്ന കാര്യം ചർച്ച ചെയ്യേണ്ടുന്ന അവസ്ഥയിലേക്കാണ് കാര്യങ്ങൾ വന്ന് നിൽക്കുന്നത്. ആവശ്യമായ നിലപാട് നമുക്ക് സ്വീകരിക്കേണ്ടി വരും.
Okay, my colleague Neetu is with us right now to bring us more context. Neetu, we played out for our audiences a few minutes ago a governor's response to the media. And just seeing his anger, that kind of anger from a government official seems unprecedented. Could you bring us more context as to what's brought him to this point? What is the context to this story? And then tell us what we have to look forward to today, please.
See, the governor was quite angry today, saying that he will not speak to two regional media channels, two Malayalam channels, Kairali News and Kairali TV and Media One. He says that they are running a propaganda against them and they are comrades masquerading media persons, and so that is why that is a response that we saw from Kochi, from Kerala Governor Arif Mohammed Khan, quite unprecedented, and he's asking the reporters of two channels to get out from that space where he was about to respond. Now, looking forward today, what we have is that this is the last day of Chancellor that the Governor as Chancellor has given to the Vice Chancellors to respond. He had sent show cause notice to 11 of them, and they have time till today. So 6 of them have already responded, and we are expecting that the others is also most likely to submit their response by today. So it's after that the governor will take into consideration all this, and then he'll take a decision on this. So it was after the Supreme Court verdict on one of the vice chancellors, that is a vice chancellor of APJ Abdul Kalam Technological University. It was after that Supreme Court order which found that appointment not valid because it did not fulfill the UGC guidelines. So based on that, the governor is saying that all these 11 vice chancellors appointments do not fulfill. So based on the Supreme Court order, he has to do that. As chancellor, it was a governor himself who had appointed all these 11 people on the recommendations from the Search and Selection Committee.
Face off between the governor, Arif Mohammed, who you can see on the left side of your screens, and the Kerala government continues. This is just one more chapter. You might remember that a little while ago, the governor had given a show cause notice